Yeah, well, I mean the Tame. I mean I've known the Tame, I suppose, from running through Brum, and it was always a dead river as far as we was concerned. Because I think it run up through the bottom of the Bromford estate.
Yeah.
My first, as it comes up the motorway, off of the city centre. Then it run out a little bit. There's some land there which is marshland. Down the left, I actually used to fly birds of prey. I used to fly them down. Which is down the side of the M6. When I was a kid, the M6 didn't exist, and it used to be called the Lost Valley. That was our local name for Pimple Hill, where somebody made some rumour up about it was a Roman burial ground or something, and the old university come on and excavated, never found anything. But you used to be able to walk across before the motorway was there. I suppose I was about 7, 8, into the Lost Valley, down to the Tame. I've obviously got the railway tracks there. Then they put the motorway in, so it became a little bit more restricted. As you followed up, as I say, it was always known as being a dead river. Even when I come with my own daughter, I suppose 20 years ago, she come to the environmental centre in Marston, and they told us then, yeah, it's a dead river, but now it's not.
So even in 20 years, you've seen a difference?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you obviously still get the technology's changed.
Yeah.
In the way that they do the water treatment out of Minworth. And talking to one or two fishermen, a bit of fishermen himself, they say you do occasionally get the pollution, but now it's fished, I believe, right the way up to the settlement lakes, or even before then. And if you go down, you look at the wildlife which is on there, the bird life which is on there. Look, cormorants don't sit around dead water. Cormorants sit around water because there's food in them. So the same as great crested grebes. They don't sit there because there's nothing there. They sit there because there's food. So if you've got that sort of wildlife in herons, then there is a little bit of, it's become, you can still have that smell, but it's become quite a healthy river now, I think.
That's an extraordinary change in only 20 years.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've never seen one, but I cycle up the Tame Valley quite regularly now, and only as far up as Tamworth. I've actually been further up where he joins the Trent. I followed it, I suppose, from where the Blythe and the Cole join it, up to the Trent, and yeah, I mean, you hear tales of otters being up there now. I think on the nature reserves, they've got areas where they're saying, no, let's, keep dogs away, because I've never seen one there. Well, I'm not convinced that they actually exist yet, but there's always hope, I suppose. There's always plenty of kingfishers around there. There's, as I say, plenty of life which suggests there's fish, sustainable fish, fish life in there.
My name, when I lived in Bodymore Heath, was Jean Tidmarsh. I was born at a cottage called Rose Cottage, which was absolutely lovely. Down a little lane, which used to be, when my mum and dad first went there, fields at the back, there was a farm. But in later years, the Midland gravel pit took over, and they dug all the gravel pits, the lakes out over the years, But my mum said it was farmland when they first went there. Many, many happy memories of it. It was a lovely village, lots of farms and animals and all the lovely harvest festivals, and we used to go potato picking during the war when the farmers used to come round to school, which was at Kingsbury, to see if we'd go potato picking, and the farmers used to come round and they'd come and pick us up, which is horrendous now when we think about it, because it was an open, like small lorry, and you just used to scramble in the back and take us to the farm, we with our buckets. They were lovely, lovely, lovely days. We used to walk to Kingsbury School from Bodymore Heath, across the fields, and which became They were fields at first with farmers growing vegetables, which the boys had nearly always got a penknife in the autumn when the Swedes came up, and they'd pull one up and and give us a little bit on the way to school. And there was what we called the short planks to go over a lovely stream which had the most beautiful wildflowers in. And then there was what they called the long planks. And that went on to the river, the big river bridge, the River Tame. And then we would wind our way, and there were then 42 steps which we used to climb up to go through the churchyard to the school. And there were 2 sets of 12. 12 was the first one, and then 3 sixes, and then another 12. They've been in my mind forever, those have, you know. But what used to happen there was it used to flood very badly, the river did. And we'd go to school maybe in the morning, and okay, the river would be up. You know, you could tell it was really high, the level of the water. But when we came in the evening, well, we used to leave school at 4 o'clock in those days, it had come right over the fields and the planks. We used to, it was quite frightening really, because it was all gushing. And I mean, for a 5-year-old, we walked there, you know, it was, but we had some fun. It was lovely really, because being a small village, everyone knew everyone. And we used to go in groups, we didn't go alone. And so we did have just a lovely time really, even though, you know, we used to get wet, I suppose, and all sorts of things. During the war, my father built us an air raid shelter in the gravel pit hills. Where they dug the gravel pit out, they used to sort of sieve it and get the gravel and then the sand, and the rest of it they made big hills, and it skirted our garden. And my dad built us an air raid shelter with railway sleepers, and then he put all like grass over the top, so it just looked like a hill, you know. And we used to go in there when the air raid sirens went. I was in the garden with my mum. I don't know whether it was morning or afternoon, it was certainly daylight, and we saw a German plane come right over us all.
Robert Williams. I have lived all of my life by the Tame. Not always directly near it, but close. I was born where the river itself is born. Talking earlier to your colleague about the dirty River Tame. It was dead. And in Tamworth you could tell that because you could stand on Lady Bridge, which is just downstream from where the two rivers join, and on the left-hand side as you looked over the bridge there'd be the dirty brown water of the Tame, and on the other side of the bridge, to the right-hand side, the water would be absolutely crystal clear, even after there'd been 200 or 300 yards of the rivers supposedly mixing, and all the swans used to be on the right-hand side in the clean water and nothing on the left-hand side.
Okay, my name's Poole. I've lived in Waterorton for a long time. My childhood was Castle Bromwich and moved to Waterorton on our marriage. My grandfather, Thomas Hall, was the first family member to work at Hams Hall Power Station. He cycled from Hockley, Birmingham, every day on his bike to get here. My father, Bertram Hall, was foreman at Hams Hall B, as I think it was, or it could have been A, for many years after a transfer from Nechel's Power Station. This was in the 1950s. He worked to his retirement in 1964. I also worked as secretary to Dr. Gillam at the research centre based at Hams Hall from 1961 to 1964. Much research was on finding a use for the pulverised fuel ash, and 2 researchers whose names escape me were commissioned to do just that. They joined up with Thermalite, who were on the Hams Hall site, and produced bricks eventually from the ash. The admin section that I worked in had a receptionist, 4 clerical assistants and a manager called Mr. Simmons. All reports and correspondence were from the laboratories, were dealt with on site. My father cycled from Castle Brom to get to Hams Hall, and I had the luxury of a lift from a colleague, Jean Diddams, in her Robin Reliant car. We had 2 tea ladies who morning and afternoon would provide tea, coffee, toast and cakes, and they were also the cleaners. My sister Patricia worked at Thermalite, so our family had our working lives based on the Hams Hall site. Happy days.
The other side of the railway from where the gas plant was, and the railway there is it splits into a fork, and the Hams Hall Power Station was the far side of the second piece of the railway. And there was, at its height, I think there was 16 cooling towers, and the pilots who were flying into Castle Brom used to use it as a turning point to line up for the runway for Castle Brom. And even when on a cloudy day, because of the vapour coming out of the cooling towers, they knew where it was because the vapour would be coming through the clouds. Because Castle Bromwich wasn't really a wartime airfield, it was where they built the Spitfires at Castle Bromwich. And most of the flights there were test flights. Very few were actually in action, if you like. The Spitfires didn't fly from there to engage the enemy, or not purposely. I believe some of them did, because they ran into German planes while they was doing the test flights. And of course that's where the famous incident occurred, where one of the girls who was holding the tail down, the plane actually took off with her sitting on the tail wing, and that happened at Castle Bromwich.
What I didn't like was that I thought there were snakes, and they used to nest where the bridge is in Lee Marston. The snakes nested by the river, just at the side of there.
Goodness me.
But I used to walk round the other side, thinking I wouldn't see any, because I'm terrified of snakes, with the dog. I say, yes. But you had to keep the dog away, because if they fell in, it was difficult to get out at that point.
Yes, yes.
Because it's very steep.
Did you ever see any snakes? Were you just aware that they were there?
Well, there was one evidently that lived in the hedge in between the next door neighbour and me, but I didn't know.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't know. And my daughter was riding her bike almost at church,
Yes.
and there was one in the road
Goodness me.
when she was riding her bike, because evidently there are quite a few in the environment next to the church where all the trees are.
Yes, yes.
There are quite
Were
a few
they been
snakes there.
adders or
Adders and grass snakes.
and grass snakes?
Yes.
Yes.
That's true. I was there when they blew down, when they demolished the chimneys.
Were you?
Yes, yes, and all the windows rattled, and
Goodness.
yes, I was there then. And occasionally I used to go to, they had an entertainment centre and dances on Saturday evenings, and I used to sometimes go there.
At the power station?
Yes,
Oh, God.
because I love dancing. I still dance, yes.
Yes.
The oldest disco dancer you've ever met.
That's brilliant. Yes.
Whereabouts was that? The entertainment centre?
Just inside the power station, which where it is now, like at the end of the lane, I suppose. I'm disorientated. Somewhere just there, wouldn't it be? Yes,
So
just here.
not too far from where we are.
No,
Extraordinary.
Yes.
I remember there was a lady and gentleman, and they used to fascinate me. The lady who always made her face up very much and wore roses in her hair, and the gentleman wore an evening suit to dancing,
Gosh.
which of course,
Fantastic.
yes,
Yes.
quite unusual,
Yes, absolutely.
because it was only a little country dance.
Yes.
When
Yes.
was that, do you think? What sort of year?
That would be just about 20 years ago.
So incredibly old-fashioned for that.
Yes, yes. I mean, the other people didn't. I mean, I went, in just ordinary dancey clothes,
Yes.
but they always dressed up in these evening suit and yes,
How lovely.
posh dancing.
And who would have gone to this entertainment centre? The people just from the local area? Did you didn't
Yes.
have to work?
Yes, just a few local people, really.
Yes.
My name is Alan Wood.
Well, whereabouts do you live?
At the moment I live in Nuneaton, but I was handyman at Blythe Hall for 25 years, from 1979 to 2004.
Marvellous. And what did you do there specifically?
Anything that needed doing, basically, except the gardens. We had a gardener for that. 1629, the original, but it burnt down. I can't remember when it burnt down, but there was only one chimney breast left, and they built the rest of the house from that chimney breast. To my knowledge, the hall has only flooded once. Before that, I understand it had never been flooded. But then we only got it in a small cellar, which was only a low cellar in the first place.
Yes, yes.
We didn't keep much in there because it was only very small, under a set of stairs. For that very reason, because it was so wet round there.
Yes. Could you just describe what Blythe Hall is like for us? For people who don't know it, how would you describe it?
It has about 13 bedrooms now. I don't know about the original. It has what people call a moat, but it isn't a moat. It's called stew ponds. It's where they used to breed the fish
Ah, yes.
to put back in the river so as they could feed themselves. Because there was no supermarkets and shops.
No,
and
absolutely.
everybody had to live off the land.
Yes.
And that's why it worked. As far as I understand, they only fed into the River Blythe because there was no way out once they were in there, because they had some sluice gates which they used to open and close to keep the water level
Ah, right, yes.
balanced. And presumably the water temperature balance, because the river would be a different temperature to the stew ponds, especially in the summer, where one would get too warm because it's not flowing and not moving anywhere, so it'd be more or less still water. So you'd open those for a couple of hours a day. I assume they were never opened in my time, but years ago they were.
Yes. Yes.
And it was on a route from Birmingham itself to Nuneaton, which was the A47 at the time. They've denumbered it now, so it's 4 numbers instead of 2.
Yes.
So that was a main route from one area to another. That's why the hall was built there originally, I think, because it was a manor house and somebody could live there, they could get to Birmingham.
Yes, yeah.
Because I suppose Birmingham those days was maybe a 2-day horse ride.